Matthew sir, join here. He's joining, I'm sure.
Kalli sir.
Hi, I'm just Srinivas. I'm here.
Sir, have you joined?
I'm fine. I'm here. I'm here.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Matthew.
Yes.
Sir, the CVC is speaking.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Very nice of you.
But we can't see you so well. I hope you see.
Just a minute. I'm just trying that. I just put it on.
Yes.
Okay. You can?
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
And Dr. Professor Narayana, are you there? Professor Narayana, can we see you? Dr. Narayana, can we see you? Is he there? Dr. Lalit Pawar is also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll come on video in a minute.
Dr. Narayana, can you come on video?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Mr. Matthew, are you accompanied by your wife or any other family member?
My wife is sitting next to me. Yes.
Okay, okay. Good.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
first, let me acknowledge you've written a very lucid book. The only problem is files deter us from reading the whole of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Should we start?
Professor Narayana, have you joined?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Narayana, we can hear you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
With your
I'm
permission.
ready.
Please come in.
So, good morning to all of you. Honorable Sri Sanjay Kothari, Chief Vigilance Commissioner, respected Sri V. Srinivasa, National Center for Good Governance, and the Additional Secretary, Department of Administrative Reform and Public Grievances, Government of India, esteemed dignitaries who have joined from all across the country, a very good morning to all of you. Today we have assembled here on the auspicious occasion of the book launch of Dr. C.K. Matthew, entitled The Historical Evolution of the District Officer. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all the esteemed dignitaries who have spared time from their busy schedule to grace this event. Today we have with us Sri Sanjay Kothari sir as the chief guest, who is also currently serving as Central Vigilance Commissioner of our country. Sri Sanjay Kothari sir served as the Secretary to President Ramnath Kovind before joining the Central Vigilance Commission. Sri Sanjay Kothari sir is a 1978 Haryana cadre IS officer who is not only a distinguished civil servant but also an accomplished academician. In his long service tenure, spanning around 3 decades, he has served as a Secretary of DARPG and DOPT, Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievance and Pension, Additional Secretary of Tourism Development, Commissioner of Women and Child Development, among other positions. Along with his successful career as a bureaucrat, he has also published many research papers and articles in journals of repute. He has represented the country at multiple international summits in Russia and Johannesburg on Incredible India while presenting papers on various subjects. Let me now give a brief about our eminent author whose book have been acclaimed widely, Dr. C.K. Matthew, who has authored his book, is a retired Indian Administrative Service Officer of the 1977 batch of the Rajasthan cadre and was former Chief Secretary of the state. He has had several important assignments such as District Collector, Secretary, Principal Secretary to the Department of Information Technology, Irrigation, Mines, Power, Disaster Management and Education, apart from being Principal Secretary to the Chief Minister for 5 years. He has also held several posts in the Finance Department, including Additional Chief Secretary Finance. Post-retirement, he was Senior Fellow in the Public Affairs Center, Bangalore, for 4 years and was the Principal Investigator for a series of 3 annual reports, 2016 to 18, on the measurement of governance in the state of India, known as the Public Affairs Index. He was also a special reporter for the Southern State under the National Human Rights Commission. He is also the author of 2 novels and was awarded PhD for his thesis on symbolism in the poem of Emily Dickinson. He is currently visiting professor at the Aziz Premji University, Bangalore, in the School of Public Policy and Governance. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Sri V. Srinivasa, Additional Secretary, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances, Government of India, and also the Director General, National Center for Good Governance. Sri V. Srinivas sir has joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1989 and has 33 years of distinguished service. He has served as Deputy Secretary and Joint Secretary in the Government of India, as Advisor to Executive Director, International Monetary Fund, Washington DC, Director General, National Archive of India, and as Deputy Director, Administration at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Sri V. Srinivas sir is an Indian Council of World Affairs Fellow for the year 2017 to 19 for his book India's Relations with the International Monetary Fund 1991 to 2016, 5 years in perspective. Sri V. Srinivasa's second book, Towards a New India Governance Transformed 2014 to 19, was published in 2019. Sri V. Srinivasa has authored more than 160 articles purpose on public finance and public administration. He is a senior policymaker and academician and an institutional builder par excellence. We also have amongst us Dr. A. Narayana, who is an associate professor of public policy and governance at Aziz Premji University, Bangalore. He studied economics and holds a PhD from the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, UK. He has over 2 decades of experience in media, consultancy, and academics. He was a Ford International Fellow from 2004 to 2007. He was the Karnataka State Coordinator for the World Bank Land Governance Assessment Framework from 2013 to 2015. He was a consultant to the Karnataka Government Expert Committee on the Reorganization of the Government of Bangalore City. He was also a member on the Election Commission of India Technical Committee on Electoral Literacy. His area of research interest include the use of digital technology for reform in land governance and local governance. Ladies and gentlemen, with these few words of the today's guest of honor and lead speaker, now I would like to invite Sri V. Srinivasa, Director General, National Center for Good Governance, to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bish. First, sir, may I invite you to kindly launch the book, then we can hear it. Please come. Just give a copy, no?
Thank you, Mr. Kota. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The mask.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Congratulations, Mr. Matthew and the family.
Thank you so much for taking time out to launch.
Flags. You take this copy. Flags. Respected Sri Sanjay Kothari ji, distinguished Sri C.K. Matthew ji, Professor Narayana, all participants in this conference, Dr. Bish. It's indeed a great privilege, sir, that you are launching this book and have joined this occasion. We could not think of any other person who has upheld the Indian Administrative Services ethics, morals, accountability in governance, and represents the best values of neutrality and anonymity, who could have launched this book. And that is the reason why, despite your initial hesitation, we insisted that you should launch the book. The National Center for Good Governance and the Aziz Premji University is deeply privileged that you are here and you have consented to launch the book, and you would be speaking on this occasion on the subject of district collector. Let me also congratulate Dr. C.K. Matthew and Mrs. Matthew on this occasion. I know the quantum of effort and sustained commitment that you had shown in terms of taking up this extensive documentation, going through volumes of historical records, and coming up with it. In fact, I was going through the initial mail exchanges that we had when you embarked on this massive project, and I do remember writing to you saying that nobody in the recent times has ever embarked a study on the India's district collector, the institution of district collector. So the first volume is out, and let me also congratulate Azim Premji University for supporting this venture. It is a massive project, and it will benefit India's public administrators, district officers, as also policymakers immensely, by providing glimpses of how the nation's administrative structures developed over the last 250 years. So with this, I have a few remarks as the lead discussant on the book. It's a 5-volume work on district collector, the first volume of which has been published and launched by you today. This volume traces the transformation of the collector from being an agent of British East India Company to occupying the position of the primary field officer in the district level, duly empowered by the Raj, and now to an all-purpose administrator in present-day India functioning, and the face of government. Dr. C.K. Matthew is eminently qualified to undertake this work, the historical evolution of the district collector. He has served 37 years in the Indian Administrative Service, and as a district collector in 2 districts of Rajasthan. One is Barmer, which is our biggest desert district, and second is our most industrialized district of Bhilwara. In Rajasthan, the district officer is often considered the Maibap of administration and accepted by all as the head of administration and the first port of call in times of crisis. And his leadership can make a difference between mediocrity and excellence. So I have seen districts rising and falling with individuals, and having served both in the district as also as Chairman Board of Revenue for Rajasthan, my own understanding of the institutions of the district have evolved over the period of time, and I could associate myself with various chapters that he had presented. And the quote that he has cited with regard to the district collector being the centrality of administration, and one of the young collectors who finds mention saying that the world is on my shoulders, but yet hence I feel at peace, is one that is quite remarkable in nature. The head of the district administration presides over a large number of people, and in the initial years they seem to be quite distant from the administration. But over the years we would find many stories of how collectors, British officers serving as district collector would undertake a lot of travels with kitchen boxes and on horsebacks or on cycles undertaking travel. Those have been narrated, and they make fascinating reading. The chapter on district officer's role in theory deals with how the British Empire envisaged the district collector. In fact, they wanted him to be an intermediary between the peasants and the zamindars at that time, so that exploitation could be stopped, and there was revenue collection became a more organized set depending upon revenue records of the day. And this continues even till today, where revenue records of a district collectorate, of tehsil offices, represent huge historical documents, and also in terms of land transfer details. Even during the World War and freedom movement, the district collectors kept the vast subcontinent in order, and they were inflexibly straight. There were no stories of massive corruption from amongst the British civil service who were working as district collectors. We had similar institutions of governance even in the Mauryan, Mughal, and Sultanate systems. Of course, the famous one was Todarmal, who discovered our own land revenue system. In fact, the road on which the Board of Revenue of Rajasthan is located is called the Todarmal Marg. And for last 400 years, our land revenue systems have remained exactly what Todarmal had decided in the Mughal times. But the story of the book is all about the British and the British East India Company developing the institution of the collector, and how a small group of British clerks along with sepoys ran some of the richest provinces of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, and appointing district collectors for assessment and collection of land revenue. It was only in 1769 that the first district collector was born and created by Warren Hastings, and thereafter the magisterial as also the judicial functions were kept separate, and from a mere 30-odd districts that the British were governing, by the time they left it reached about 250 districts. There were various systems of land administration that the British introduced, Zamindari, Raitwari, and also Jagirdari systems which we had in Rajasthan, and princely states holding huge amounts of land, and how as part of the welfare state many of us have operated on sealing laws, redistribution of land and tenancy laws. One thing that struck me was that how important it was to do revenue and magisterial work, and the district collector's control over land revenue through tehsils and village servants represented the core of his job, and his support with the superintendent of police was another feature of his entire work in controlling law and order. And many of their salaries and service conditions were fixed even under the British Raj, and promotions were on the basis of seniority. The Indianization of the Indian civil service started with Satyendranath Tagore being the first officer to be appointed there. The sheer shortage of British officers to administer India was felt, and 40% was recruited from the British, 40% by direct recruitment, and 15% by promotion. Even during the war and struggle for independence, the British officers maintained a neutral stand and ensured that law and order was the paramount exercise. And in the years between 1935 and 47, when many British officers left the service, there was a large-scale exodus, and the Indianization became complete. So those officers who went back were given pension and lump sums for loss of a career. There are various versions of it on how the district officers function, but one thing that stands out is they were praised for devotion, efficiency, incorruptibility, and impartiality. And I think these values continue to remain relevant even today. A neutral position, impartial position, that's why officers are assigned to different cadres, and that is where people stand out. So with these opening remarks, sir, let me thank you for accepting the NCGG's invite, and let me thank Dr. Matthew for allowing us to launch his book in consultation with the Azim Premji University. Thank you. Narayana.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor A. Narayana, Associate Professor, Department of Public Policy, Azim Premji University, Bangalore, for a few words about Professor Narayana.
We're not able to hear you.
Your mic is muted.
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
No, Matthew. Professor Narayana, can you?
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Bist. Good afternoon, Shri Sanjay Kothari ji, Secretary Shri V. Srinivas, Dr. Matthew, and all the esteemed participants. On behalf of Azim Premji University, I would like to, first of all, thank the National Center for Good Governance, the Government of India's Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances, and Dr. Matthew for organizing this event and inviting me to speak a few words. I must also say at this juncture that it was a great learning opportunity for me and my colleagues in the university to have got involved in planning this publication along with Dr. Matthew and reading it from its very early draft. Mr. Srinivas has already spoken at length on the book, so I'll try to be brief and I'll make a few broad observations, not necessarily on the book per se, but on the central theme that the book addresses. That is the office of the district collector or the district officer. For any curious student of the Indian state and its operations, and I consider myself as one such student, the collector's office, we call in our part of the country it as the DC's office, Deputy Commissioner's office, offers an exciting site of study. Now, why is it so exciting? There are many reasons, and let me list a few. This is the site where the regulatory state, the developmental state, and the welfare state meet. I don't think there is another site at that level where all the three functional arms of the state meet, the regulatory state, the developmental state, and the welfare state. And it is also the site of another confluence because it is a site where the national government, the provincial or the state government, and the local government meet. And more importantly, perhaps, it is a site that at once presents a strange combination of the colonial and pre-colonial feudal and post-colonial modern constitutional phase of the state power. Now, this is another reason, to my mind, which makes this site extremely interesting and exciting for any student who is interested in understanding the operations. A lot has been written about this office, and it is also, all of us know that the most familiar phase of the state power. There have been any number of academic studies, there have been any number of fictions. I remember two fictions in particular, Upamani Chatterjee's work and Arun Joshi's work, the novel called A Strange Case of Billy Vishwas, which actually fictionalizes the collector's office to a great extent, and there are some very valuable lessons for us to learn even from fictional accounts. Now, despite this flurry of works, both in academic circles and in non-academic circles, I think a lot is yet to be said, and a lot is yet to be known. A lot is yet to be demystified about this important office of the Indian state. Now, we academicians are often known to be remystifying rather than demystifying things. So it was great that we could collaborate with someone like Dr. Matthew to understand this important office, because to me, or I consider that knowledge about the operations of the Indian state can be best produced only when academic institutions collaborate with the participants in the real world of administration, especially the members of the Indian Administrative Service. When we collaborate with them, it is possible to understand the state in such great details that which is not possible otherwise for us academicians. So this is what we think, and therefore this 5-part series that we are planning to bring out is a collaborative work, and we are very happy that the department and the center have joined hands with us. And while this particular volume deals with the history of the office, the next 4 parts will talk more about the present and the future. Let me make my second point here. The second point is somewhat about the book. Now, the question here is, what is the story of this history of the district officer in India that Dr. Matthew narrates in 200 odd pages, what is the story of history is really the story of. Again, to my mind, although it is not stated there very explicitly, it's the story of a major shift in the location of the administrative power that happened during the colonial time. We all know that till then, we had a system in which day-to-day administration happened at the villages. During the colonial time, the locus of administration shifts to the larger spatial unit called the district. Now, one distillation that we can have from the pages of this book is about this transformation, this shift from villages to the district, and from a group of people called panchayats to a single authority called the collector or the district officer. But more curious about this transformation is that this transformation that happened some 30 years ago has provided such a curious, stable arrangement that arrangement has lasted so long. Not only that it has lasted, it has also maintained its preeminence despite all odds. And I think this is the curious part of the story which needs to be told in great detail. And we think that Dr. Matthew's book is a starting point in this direction. Now let me spend a couple of minutes to explain what this stability and what this continuity and what this holding on to preeminence all about. A lot of changes have happened, globally and nationally and locally since the office was established nearly 250 years ago. But nothing has reduced the importance of the district as the site of administration. We had independence, and at the time of independence, it was thought that, okay, now there may be some kind of changes coming about in this arrangement. Nothing changed. And in 1992 and 1993, when we had the 73rd and 74th Amendment, again, there were discussions that there might be some kind of changes happening at the district administration level, and some kind of changes will be brought about in the office of the district collector, district officer. But very interestingly, the Second Administrative Reforms Commission notes with the sense of relief that instead of 73rd and 74th Amendments reducing the importance and centrality of the district collector, it only made it even more important. Now that he has he has more works to do, and his role as some kind of coordinator at that level has only increased because of the 73rd and 74th Amendment. 73rd Amendment, all of us know, constitutionalized rural local governance in India, and 74th Amendment constitutionalized urban local governance in India. Now, although this constitutionalization happened, nothing materially or realistically changed in the way the district office functioned. It only added to its responsibility. Let me also add a personal anecdote here. Some 15 years ago, as a PhD student, I was spending a lot of time with patwaris or village accountants in the remote parts of Karnataka. And one of the senior patwaris, who was almost about to retire, made an important observation about the collector's office. What he said is this. He said, every time the government of India presents its budget, every time a state government presents its budget, every time parliament passes a law, every time a state legislature passes its law, every time the government of India or a state government announces a new scheme, it only adds to the work of the collector. And subsequently, it also adds to the work of the patwari. That's what he said. Now, the important point for us to note here is that not only has this office stayed, survived, but also there has been a continuous increase in the workload that it has been called upon to carry. Now, this is the curious element, that it survived, and also it has not crumbled under the pressure that has been mounting on it, over what the last 2 centuries. Now, I think this is the story that we need to say or narrate in greater details in the 5 volumes that Dr. Matthew has planned, and we have joined hands with. Let me make a last point, which is about the current situation and the future. To my mind, there are 2 important changes that are sweeping now, which may have some kind of implication for the future of this. One, of course, all of us know is technology. We know that information technology, especially, has brought about so many changes, which is redefining not only the way the district officer functions, but also he or she relates to his or her subordinates, superiors, and superiors of superiors, which of course are people. Now, not only in the way of operation, but also in the way this office relates to all its stakeholders, is undergoing some kind of massive change because of the use of the technology, and how the office is going to adjust to this, how it comes to terms with this, something that we in the business of academics are watching seriously, and that story will unfold in the future. Now, the second point, of course, this is not a point which we get to know much in popular writing or academic writing. This change is about the profile of the staff of various government offices in general, but in particular of the office of the district collector or district officer and all the officers below the district office. Now, we go to any district office or any sub-district office or any block office, we will see that nearly 50% of the staff there are not the regular staff or regular bureaucrats, as we used to call them at one point in time. So most of the staff now, at least I can say about Karnataka and other states, they are either contractual employees or the technical staff deputed by these companies which provide software and hardware solutions to these offices. Now, this changes the very understanding of the bureaucracy, the Weberian bureaucracy, Weberian ideal type of bureaucracy that we always used to understand the bureaucratic space, now needs to be redefined altogether because of this change. That's the theoretical side. From a practical side, I think this again has massive implications for the way the office itself functions. One point there which makes me come to this conclusion that this change will have some implication for the way it functions, is this, which is every government office, especially the offices where power is concentrated and a great deal of work gets done on a day-to-day basis, there is something called an institutional memory and a kind of institutional practice and a kind of institutional memory-based learning which happens. Generations of young collectors, they learn from this institutional memory of the office as a collective and use them in their day-to-day operations. Now, there is a clear break in the way this institutional knowledge is transferred from one generation to another generation of the permanent staff there because of this disruption in the staffing pattern that has happened because of technology and because of the recruitment practices that have changed of late. Now, to me, it seems that apart from all other things which are obvious, these two factors are going to pose certain kind of challenges and would require us to look at this office with some kind of new perspective. So I think Dr. Matthew's book will also be a starting point in understanding some of the some of the future trends that are likely to emerge in this very interesting space of Indian administration and Indian state. I think I'll stop here once again by thanking Secretary Srinivas in particular, and NCCG, and Dr. Matthew for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about his important work. And we, students of public administration and public policy, no doubt will stand a great deal or learn a great deal from this publication and the four that are going to follow this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Narayana, for your wonderful ideas and opinions that you shared with us today. May I now request C.K. Mathew, sir, to speak about your book, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bish. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to Mr. Sanjay Kothari for having taken the time to be present here. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to have this book launched by you. My special thanks also to Mr. Srinivas, because he's an old friend and colleague from Rajasthan, and he has also taken extra effort in arranging today's program. My thanks to Mr. Narayan also, with whom I used to have a lot of detailed discussions when the book was being written, and he has given the larger context in which this book is somewhat significant. Let me try to begin by trying to answer Mr. Srinivas's question to me 2 days ago. He asked me, what is the motivation? Why did you write this book? I'm going to begin from there. I understand that Mr. Kothari's father himself was a very senior IAS officer right at the beginning of Free India. In the same way, my father too was in the IAS. He belongs to the 1952 batch of Kerala cadre. Again, my elder brother, he comes from the Gujarat cadre of 1968, and he's actually on this conversation today. So in this fraternity of the IAS officers, I have noticed that whenever a person talks about his experience, the period that he spent as district collector has a certain glow about it. He becomes even sentimental, even emotional when he talks about his experiences in the district. So for me, I would say that it has been to write this entire book, and I thoroughly enjoyed the writing of it. Why is that? Why is it that this post creates so much of emotion? You know, when a young officer lands up in the district, he's hardly 27, 28 years old. And he gets the kind of administrative freedom and autonomy which is rarely given in government. Unless there is some crisis or some big emergency, he is left to his own devices. And if he is sincere, hardworking, he can do much to change the tenor of the administration of that district. He can redress the grievances of people. Virtually everything lands on his table. There is no matter which is outside his purview. Even today, under the pandemic, the leadership provided in the district is by the district collector. So that is why I began my book with that quotation from Mr. K.K. Das. There is not and never has been an official like the collector anywhere else. It's a unique instrument which has been used by both the British government and our own independent Indian government to carry out all its programs, to keep a watch over what is happening, and we will talk about that as we go ahead. Now, when we generally talk about the administrative structure or the hierarchy, you know, an average thinking person would know quite a bit about the national government, prime minister, the ministries, and so on. He would also have a good idea about the state government, the chief minister, and so on. But down the line, the knowledge about the post of the district collector and that enormous importance of that post is not really known by the average person. So it is, I think, one of the intentions of this book for the public reader or for students of public administration to let them know the criticality of this post and how he has to get this district working by combining all the forces and all the elements in that district. You know, this is the one common thread across the 700 districts of our country. which is a uniform element of administration which has held our country together. I would go so far as to say it held our country together through thick and thin. So that is why this book, while it deals with the history of the post, the next 4 volumes will look at 4 other aspects of the district collector's job. The next book would be about the district collector as the manager of land, because he is the master of all the land in this area. The second would be his role as district magistrate to maintain law and order. Third part will be his official role as the district development officer. And finally, we will look at a very interesting aspect of how the collector is standing between the executive and the political. He's the interface between the executive and the political and has to observe all the shocks and run the district in a manner that brings about development as well as maintaining peace and tranquility. Now, I want to just take a minute to look at this relationship between 3 aspects of governance: land, state, and citizen. You will all know that the Mughal Empire was slowly collapsing, and the Battle of Clives comprehensively defeated the Nawab of the Bengal area and took over the administration of that place. But then Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II realized that the control over that part of the country was slowly dwindling. He did not have much control over it. So he decided that if you can't beat your enemy, let's join him. And so he appointed the British East India Company as an agent collection of taxes. This is what is known as the Diwani, the agreement of Diwani, whereby the collection of taxes was handed over to the East India Company. East India Company was simply an agent, an outsourced agent to collect the revenue and pass it on to the emperor while keeping a certain ratio, agreed ratio with him. Now, I think this is fundamental to understanding what is the role of the district collector. With the passage of time, 10, 15, 20 years, the thinking people of England or in the parliament that you cannot simply collect money from the people and give nothing back in return. You are not simply an agent to collect money and then forget about the welfare of the people. So within 2 decades of this arrangement of the Diwani, within 2 decades, people started questioning the East India Company, saying, you cannot be simply a commercial agent to collect money for your corporation. You have to start thinking about elements of governance. And this is why I think one quotation, which I'm just going to read out a few lines, somewhere in the 1780s or 85, after the system had started operation, a gentleman by the name of Harry Verelst was a very senior employee of the East India Company. He wrote his directions to the collectors, the supervisors and collectors who are engaged in the task of collection of the revenues. He wrote a very good letter, which is valid even today. And I'm just going to read a part of it to you. You are to convince the cultivator that you will stand between him and the hands of oppression, that you will be his refuge and the redresser of his wrongs, that honest and direct application to you will never fail producing speedy and equitable decisions. He also goes on to say, let access to you be easy and be careful of the conduct of your dependents. Aim at no undue influence yourself and check it in all others. A great share of the integrity, assiduity, and watchfulness is necessary for your guidance, but as an example to all others. For your activity and advice will be in vain unless confirmed by example. If you think that an East India Company officer is writing this in 1780-85, just after the collection of revenues had begun, his realization that it is not merely a commercial operation, but you have to give good governance too. In those early days, I think that is something very, very remarkable in the evolution of the post of district officer. So when you ask a young IAS officer, district collector, about the post, you'll be astonished at how much he doesn't know. The history, I'm talking of the history. He did not know that the post was created in the year 1772 by Warren Hastings himself. By an official order, he called this post of collection of revenue the collector. And in the last 250 years since, one unbroken line, one tradition which is unbroken until today, that office continues. A young IAS officer today will not know that the district collector did not get a salary. Rather, he was given a percentage of the profit he generated for his company. You cannot think of such a situation now, of course, because he's a part of the government. But at that point of time, a certain percentage of the profits of the East India Company was his salary. Thirdly, I would also like to emphasize in this book the three phases of the post of the collector. First, as an agent of the East India Company. The second, starting from 1858, after the First War of Independence, and the British government directly took over the control of the country through the British Parliament. That is the second phase, which is perhaps the golden age of the district collector. And lastly, after 1947, when the collector becomes a representative of the government working in the field. So these three phases are to bring out their differences and how they continued as part of the presentation of the book. I would also like to talk about some perils, some dangers in writing about this book, which I must mention here. In a time when we are aggressively patriotic and nationalistic, sometimes it is difficult for a writer to talk about an invention of a foreign government, which has done so much of good in our country. Sometimes we tend to be washing it over, we skip it over. But the fact is, we do not need to be ashamed about this. I know there is a sufficient literature currently going on in our country about the depredation brought by the British, how they destroyed economy, trade, commerce, how they took back all the profits to London. All those books are still available. In fact, one of the earliest books was written by Will Durant himself, who gave a detailed account of the kind of loot that was carried out by the British East India Company. Recently, we have the book of Shashi Tharoor. We have the book of William Dalrymple, both of whom have criticized the company completely. But when reading through all these three books, I noticed that not much has been talked about the period after 1858. All this is relevant for the period of the British East India Company prior to the First War of Independence, prior to the 1858 Government of India Act. But thereafter, it is the district collector endowed with so much of power who actually carried out day-to-day administration in the country. So I thought that it is necessary to understand that we need not be ashamed of acknowledging the unique institution created by the British. Let us also not forget our own administrative system of the country, the legal system of the country, the education system of the country, all has been given by this large British concept of governance. And the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act, the Registration and Stamp Act, Criminal and Civil Procedure Codes, all these were their inventions. And we are using them to good advantage even today. One more aspect I would like to say, and then I won't take too much time. The leaders of the War of Independence made a difference, really made a difference between the British Empire, situated in London and Delhi and Shimla, and the officer, the district officer working in the field. Because while Gandhiji and all the leaders were fighting against the British Empire, they did have a lot of respect for the district officer who was working down on the village level. So this dichotomy is important to understand. The way the movement went forward, while opposing ideas of imperialism, they were actually in support of the district officer. And I wanted to just again read out one quotation of a British officer from in the 1930s. Gandhiji has started his manufacture of salt as a rebellion against the British government. And at that time, Mr. Symington, who was district collector in Nashik, and where people were actually manufacturing salt from the sea, he wrote, and it's very important to read this. In 1930, when I was aged just 26, in common with the great majority in the service, I was not at all opposed to the idea of Indian independence. I thought it was intrinsically desirable. I did not mind amateurs going to the seaside and making a few handfuls of horrible salt as a demonstration. That was on par with making speeches. and I unsportingly refused to oblige anyone by arresting them. So here was a British officer, ICS officer, who had some sympathy, hidden sympathy for the freedom movement. Now you can imagine the plight of an Indian ICS officer working during those days. He's an Indian, but he's a servant of the empire. He has to give his loyalty to that foreign power. But as an Indian, he would have also felt deeply for the freedom movement that was taking place in the country. Finally, I would like to read just two quotations from Gandhiji himself. One in which he condemns the district collector, and the second in which he appreciates the manner of governance conducted by them. So this is somewhere in 1930 in an essay called Duty of Disloyalty, written by Gandhiji in Young India. He wrote, "It may be safely said that there are as many rulers as there are districts in the country. These are called collectors and combine in their own persons the executive as well as judicial functions. These rulers are often capricious and regulated by nothing but their own whims and fancies. They represent not the interests of the people, but those of their foreign masters or principals. These nearly 300 men form an almost secret corporation, the most powerful in the world." So at the height of the freedom movement, Gandhiji was hitting out against the British Empire, and he made this sentence. But you will also note that a few years later, while talking about the quality of governance in the country, he also says, Gandhiji himself says, "We have no hesitation in saying that one of the greatest secrets of the success of the British Empire is its ability to deal out even-handed justice. It makes up for many a defect in their legal administration. It serves as a beacon light to all Indians." So, as I was saying, this dichotomy between the war against the British imperial government and their fondness for the man on the spot, handing out justice and managing the affairs of the district down on the village level, this dichotomy I have tried to present in this book, and I hope it has come out well. I would have liked to speak much more, but because of the shortage of time, let me say that again, it is an honor for me that Mrs. Kothari has agreed to launch this book. I would also thank him once more from the bottom of my heart, and also Mr. Srinivas and Mr. Narayan for having been arranging this program today. Thank you all so much.
Sir, would Mrs. Matthew like to say something on this occasion?
No, she's denied. She says no. Thank you.
She's herself an author, and so before I hand over the floor to the Honorable CVC, may I request you to take two questions. One, of course, you mentioned it, and every time a collector goes into his district, this is what he feels. I know the world was on my shoulders, and for just this reason, my heart was light, is the description of a young collector in those years. Did you ever feel this when you went to Barmer or Bhilwara? The world being on your shoulders?
Like you have described in this book, I was just 27 years old, 28 years old, when I landed up at Badmer district. Badmer is as large as the state of Kerala. That's the size of that district. And right on the international border, western side. That district is completely a desert district, full of sand dunes and sandstorms throughout the year. The water is brackish. I remember my wife saying that her hair was falling out because of the brackish water. But I would say that since the district was far away from Jaipur, a good about 300, 400 kilometers from Jaipur, intervention from the secretariat in Jaipur was virtually nil. So you had all the freedom and all the autonomy to manage the district in the best way possible. I used to carry out a lot of tourings and come back, and I really enjoyed it. So I would say that the weight of the world was certainly not on my shoulders, but I really enjoyed interacting with the people there, talking to them, despite being from the South India, where my command over the Hindi language also not too good. But I think the people really responded, and we had a good time, and I enjoyed my 2 years there. Thank you.
with you. You mentioned about your travels in Barmer. There is also a note sheet that you have put about Ajmer district collector undertaking travels on horseback in 1890. Well, what do you recall of your travels in those years in Barmer district particularly, where population is so sparse, dune cover is so high? Did you experience this, that you would have to stop at a number of places and inspect and then move on, conduct night halts?
See, what was interesting at that time, I wouldn't say interesting, but quite problematic, was that that was a terrible famine year. Drought conditions were extreme. And the collector's time was spent in arranging relief works. I remember almost 1 lakh of persons were employed on relief works throughout the district. So we had to do a lot of traveling. We had to stop in the middle of the day when the sun is hot. We had to stop at Dak bungalows, wait for a couple of hours, and then start moving again. I used to feel absolutely terrible about the laborer working under the pitiless sun of Badmer. And we tried to do whatever we could by providing some shade and providing water for him periodically. So to me, I think that period was very, very tough because we had to protect the people, human resource of the state, but also in the sense that a lot of compliance is given to the words of the collector. Collector finds something wrong, he just has to say, and the concerned activity that has to take place for providing relief just did take place. Also, of course, that was 45 years ago. I don't know how the situation is now, but probably the collector has had more clout in those days. But I really enjoyed those days I spent in the desert.
The last question I have for you today is the sense of justice that the collector has to provide pervades the book. In fact, chapter after chapter, it comes across the collector as one who is pursuing justice, a neutral administration, impartial administration, standing up for the oppressed and the poor. How strongly did you feel about these values in your stint as district collector?
You know, it is a very interesting question you've asked. And I felt that sense of justice to be enhanced because I was a complete stranger to that district. This may not sound very charitable to the persons from Rajasthan, but it is a fact that if you are an outsider, there is a general perception that you would be more neutral or equitable in your activities. This may be wrong, this is the impression I got. But rather than going into what I felt, I would like to read out just one, if you permit me, one last couple of sentences. In 1899, when the district collector was at the height of his powers, a traveler from England came and visited some districts in India. And he wrote a brief description about the district officer. And as Srinivas was saying, a sense of justice and so on. He wrote a brief, small paragraph about what the district collector is. And that to me epitomizes what his role is and what it should be even today. So I'll just read it out. If you want to see the government of India at its daily work, dealing with the people, raising its taxes, spending them, unselfishly toiling for the benefit of the people, then you must seek out the district officer, who is the backbone of administrative India. Thus he rules by himself his kingdom of 5,000 square miles and 800,000 souls. A most commendable regulation directs him to spend many weeks a year in a camp, journeying from one point to another. He inspects the village registers, he checks the cattle census returns, he refutes the complaints of the people, proves by example into touring. And through all, this is the last sentence I wanted to say, through all this primitive hospitality, primitive corruption, primitive joy and sorrow, moves the father and mother of the district, granting, refusing, punishing, fostering, respected, feared and trusted to his 800,000, he is omnipotence. And he ends by saying, I should have mentioned that he was just 36 years old and had been at this kind of work for 6 years. A British officer who lands up in the district when he's about 30, just like now. I think we have been devaluing the powers of the district collector, his prestige and his position by various different influences and inputs, which I do not want to describe now. But if you are in a position to grant him greater authority and autonomy, I am sure he will deliver much more results. Thank you.
Public से audience से नहीं पूछ सकते?
Sir, there are 800 plus in the audience.
One or two ले आप तो नहीं.
I have received a request from Professor Srinivas Pati, the Head of Department of Public Administration in Mizoram University, with the request that he would like to pose a question to the author. Professor Pati, can you please unmute yourself and pose your question?
Yeah, okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hearty congratulations. Actually, so sorry, I'm another meeting here physically. So I still enjoy through online. So my question is, what is the present scenario that Dr. Matthews should suggest for the young DC, that the office for 250 years, what should be done now? What possible reforms in the office of DC as a lifetime civil servant and writer, researcher, what you will suggest? This is my only query. Thanks a lot for the excellent speech.
I think it is too big a question to answer in.
No, whatever you feel like, please, whatever you feel like, little bit.
It is a part of the democratic progression of a country, and more power will flow to the people. We cannot think of days as in those days when all omnipotency powers were given to the collector. We cannot think of that now. As aspirations rise, people's involvement in the district administration will increase. So we should not hope for going back to those old pre-independence days and wish that the collector had the same kind of power. Having said that, we must also appreciate the fact that government is spreading. Various departments are coming in the districts, where earlier there used to be just a police officer and maybe a district judge and a PWD engineer. There are maybe 40 or 50 district level officers assisting the collector. And with the advent of democracy, with the 73rd and 74th Amendment, there are public representatives who are part of the process of administration. So I cannot think of a system where you go backwards to a time when one man held all the power. The key would be to empower the district collector to work with these different agencies, with these different sources of power, work in such a manner that he can manage things smoothly, peacefully, and ensure the development of the district. At this stage, it is difficult to say anything more than this, but maybe sometime later we can have a discussion bilaterally. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think in your other 4 books you can think about it. Next 4 books, 4 volumes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pati. Thank you, Dr. Pati. We have a question from Professor Rumki Basu. Professor Rumki, would you like to pose your question, please?
कलेक्टर से पूछ लो.
Achha. Sir, we have Dr. Lalit Pawar, sir, one of our longest standing.
Oh, he is a colleague, but
Yes.
ask the present collector.
Achha, present collector. Because he succeeded Mr. Matthew in Western Rajasthan.
Lalit is a old.
Sir, shall we ask Mr. Matthew's brother to say a few words?
Good.
Sir, if your brother is willing to speak a few words, we would be happy to hear him say something on his recollections of seeing you as a district collector. We have a number of collectors from Rajasthan, sir, a number of them, Bhagwati, or if you want me to call them young officers. Sir, would your brother like to say a few words on this occasion?
Can you hear us?
I see his
I
name
think the
here.
voice
But
is gone.
Sir, I'll call.
एक कलेक्टर से
Yeah.
उसकी कहानी सुन.
Can any of the collectors speak? Can any of the young collectors in the event speak? Bhagwati Prasad Kalal, Collector Sirohi, you're in the group. Can you please speak? Bhagwati Prasad,
Any collector, any.
any district collector who's joining today? It was participation list.
What we can do, we can take it at the end.
We can take it.
Yeah.
So may I now invite the Central Vigilance Commissioner, Sri Sanjay Kothari ji, a man who symbolizes the very essence of good governance. And in my decades of knowing him, I've greatly been inspired by the values he espoused: neutrality, justice, and also a huge amount of sympathy and empathy for the downtrodden. We are grateful that you accepted our invite, sir, and kindly address us on this occasion.
Mrs. Matthew, Mr. Matthew, your brother, Professor Narayana, the colleagues from Azim Premji Institute, if Director LBSNA is here along with his colleagues, the district collectors for whom the book has been written, faculty of public administration from various universities, members of DR, PG, NCGG, my colleague Janki. It has been a great experience listening to Mr. Matthew and seeing the book. In fact, it's a very, very deep research which has gone into it. In fact, when you speak at the end, you find that most of the things you wanted to speak has already been spoken. So I would go interacting on some of the questions. The first thing which I wanted to mention, I also wanted to know why you wrote the book. You answered on your own. But having worked as Chief Secretary, you have also worked on in the rear view mirror reflections of Chief Secretaries, which would be an interesting experience. The language is very lucid. You speak very well. It's very difficult to speak after you. In fact, I just wanted to quote one or two lines on the author's note, which would be an education, very, very good, well written. The germ of the idea to write this series of volumes on the role of the district officer had always been in my mind through the almost 4 decades I spent in the Indian Administrative Service. Very good beginning, and subsequently you write, yet in all this time, the closest I was to ground zero was as district officer. There's no denying this fact that for an IS officer, the district is the main thing which he or she keeps repeating throughout his life. So that was very interesting. I just want to add a few things. I also wanted to quote Mr. Das, which you have quoted, but when about 15 years back, I was reading a book where there was a mention of district collector. I don't know what the book was, but it said it's such an institution which is a combination of a leader, which is a combination of a bureaucrat, which is a combination of an army officer, because it's a unique officer who can do anything. No one is listening. No one is wanting to hear a no from a collector, and that is the institution. But this line is very, very interesting. The whole emphasis. I would also like to narrate something. When I was a collector, I was collector in Gurgaon in 1985, and Gurgaon, what it looks like, was just emerging out. And at that time, we had 2 other subdivisions which are now district, that is Nu and Firozpur Jarka. Now, these were Mewat area, and I was a bachelor collector, so was very fond of touring quite intensively. Early in the morning, I used to go out on tour, and I used to find in Nu and Jarka that the teachers were not coming. So I asked them, why do they not come? Why don't they come? They said, sir, why do they come today? So I said, they don't come. They said, he comes only once a month, just to pick up his salary. And at times he comes once in 2 months to take 2 months' salary. So I started suspending that. I didn't know whether I had the powers or not. So headmasters, teachers after teachers started suspending. I used to start from one place. So the thing went round and the teachers said they'll get out my residence. And they can't take all this. Why should they come daily? So the chief minister called me and he asked me what has happened. So I said, how can a person draw the salary if he's not coming daily? So he said, what will you do? I said, well, I've suspended them. So he said, will you be in a position to handle? I said, yes. So he said, how will you handle it? So I answered to him that what I'll do is, if they keep doing like this, I'll give a full page ad that this country doesn't deserve teachers. Why should we have teachers who don't come to the school at all? He listened to me. He says, go ahead. If you can handle them. But then he also, very nice of him, he also said, let me also share something with you. I said, Saab, bataiye whatever you want to say. So he told me, in the entire state, wherever I suspend people, I put their headquarters at New or Firozpur Jharka, and when the suspension period is quite long, I reinstate them and put them in New and Firozpur Jharka. So he said, but still you will handle them. So I said, yes, if they want to get salary, they'll have to work. He said, go ahead. So I didn't put an ad. They got the message. They went back to work. I said, you have to come daily if you want to take your salary. So is that just the power? I don't know whether I had any powers of the education department, but I was quite convinced that they'll have to come to the school. But coming on the note, similar note, what Mr. Matthew has said, there's a lot of trust. I'm also of the same vintage as Mr. Matthew. Lot of generation gap has gone into it. But still there's a lot of trust in the institution of the collector. In fact, if the collector says anything, they just agree. No one argues with it. Very, very powerful institution. And I keep saying throughout my career, you should know how to use power, but use it justifiably. Don't use it correctly. If you do not have an agenda, you can push through anything. So I would also like to state one or two small anecdotes. Still in some places in India, people, if some person in the village or the town bosses around, people say, are you a collector here? Kya tum collector lage ho yahan? Now that is the authority that the district officer commands. Please make full use of it. Maybe there is a huge generation gap, but I was with all of you till 2016 as Secretary DOPT. So it's just a question, if your intentions are right, you can use your authority. The second anecdote, which most of you must be aware of, which does find a mention in Mr. Matthew's book, is they recognize, some people are quoting, that there are three authorities in the country: the Prime Minister, the Chief Minister, and the District Magistrate. Maybe an anecdote to use that power. The other thing which Mr. Matthew has said, I would like to quote, we do not know who told that the service is the steel frame. I'm just quoting it from his book. In 1922, the British Prime Minister Lloyd George described the British service as the steel frame, 1,200 officials to administer a population of 3,500 million. Now we have more than 730 districts and a total approved strength of IS 6,500, went terribly short of officers. In fact, as Secretary DOPT, I was so hard pressed that everywhere I met anyone, they used to ask me, give me 2 IS officers, as if I was carrying IS officers in my pocket. And they used to give me a very wise solution, how do you create IS officers? Now the situation is more comfortable, so things are quite different. There's also a mention that the district collector is everything. In fact, for the state government or for the government of India, the collector is one person who can do anything. And you tell him and he'll do it. That takes me, in fact, we all were in charges of 2010 Commonwealth Games. Lot of chaos. Last 20 days, Mr. Chandrasekhar was the cabinet secretary. So he called all of us and he told all of you are collectors, just manage. We don't know how you manage. So I was looking after the accommodation of the foreign delegates and others. So one day when I was in Hotel Ashoka looking after the accommodation of all the officials, one of the foreign delegates called me. He said, are you from somewhere in the organization of Commonwealth Games? I said, yes. He very bluntly told me, you know, your country promised me that when I come to India, they'll give me a car. They haven't given me a car. So I said, I don't look after transport, but you have mentioned to me, so I'll find out. So I called all of them. I asked them, what is the problem? Why are you not giving the car? So one of the private companies was handling this. They said, sir, we have the cars, we have the drivers. The question is the drivers don't know the way. So if the man tells him, take him somewhere, he'll take him somewhere else. So I said, okay, we'll sort out this problem. Then I asked him, what is the other problem? The other problem the games were held in October. So they said, sir, it's still very warm. So if we give them packed food, it goes bad. So they go out for lunch for 2 hours. So that is why we used that ingenuity. So I asked him, Tell me one thing. In India, you have so many things to eat. Give him rusk, give him matris, you give him anything. He needs food if he's coming on duty at 5. And the solution would be done. They said, yes, that can be done. So I told them from now onwards, give them all these things. Whether you give them parantha or sabji, you give them these things. From next day onwards, things were in order. The cars were in order. So these are very, very small solutions which needs a bit of common sense. These were the two things I thought I'll mention to the young collectors and the other people who are listening to this. One or two things which probably you would be using it in the 3rd volume, the district officer. Very interesting. The rivalry between the collector and the SP is eternal. So right from the day ICS and IP offices are there to the youngest collectors who are there, I did my district, left it in 86, is the rivalry between the collector and the SP. Very interesting anecdote. In one of the classes in 42 years back when Mr. N.C. Saxena, who subsequently became director, raised all the issue, the common rivalry between a collector and SP. And at the end of the class, he came to the conclusion that the SP is better placed, more powerful. One of the young officers, my batchmate, he stood up and he said, sir, we have been cheated badly. So he asked them, how have you been cheated? So he said, sir, what has happened to us? Somehow, either we don't know, we had a higher rank. At that time, people told us that IS is the best service, so we joined it. Otherwise, vis-a-vis our rank, we would have got the IPS service and we should have been guided properly. So that is an interesting anecdote. That doesn't mean that doesn't lessen the quality of the IS. The second is a more interesting incident. I was on tour to Madurai visiting a very famous institution. The young ACUT assistant collector under training came and called on me. So I asked her to come and join me for lunch. During the lunch, she was engaged or married to an IPS officer. Young under training officers have a lot of privileges. So she asked me, sir, I feel that IPS is better. My husband or fiancé gets 2-3 persons, so many people to look after, and the life is better, gets all the salutes, gets number of vehicles. So I asked her, what is your rank? She said 56. I said, you could have got IPS. She said, sir, no, I will not join IPS. I would continue to be an IS. You can't have the best of the world. So this would come in your subsequent chapters. The only thing which I want to mention is a very, very enlightened service. You are the captain of the team. You have to take your team together. You are the person who have to care for all the officers. You are the person who have to inspire them by your leadership. So take it in that context. These were the two things which I wanted to mention. There's a lot of talk about horseback. When I was in Gurgaon, we all are very fond of talking throughout a career when you are a collector. I used to move around in the district on the horseback from one town to another, and later on the sides of this embankment, take the horse on a gallop and to canter and to gallop. Great fun, but had left some impressions at that time. We used to travel quite a bit. Mr. Narayana had, now I'll move to my role as Secretary DOPT. Mr. Narayana had mentioned huge workload. In fact, we all pitied the collectors. When we were collectors, we only had about 20-30 crores of central government money. Now I believe and understand that the collectors handle about 400, 500. So we called a few collectors, sat with the cabinet secretary and asked them to narrate their experience. Some of the collectors were very blunt and they said, sir, we are certainly going to jail. So he asked them why. He said, we have no staff, we keep signing whatever checks are sent. If we don't sign, the joint secretary in the ministry says, you are not the only collector, we are also the collectors. The only thing which I would like to say, we do pity them for less staff, but under all central government programs, say NREGA or the health program, you have certain percentage of money for employing people. The question is, are you employing them? Break through the system. The collectors are known to break through the system. Get people who can help you in finance, who can help you in making projects. It's your ingenuity to get people. In fact, yesterday when I was just looking at the papers, I was checking up whether the states are utilizing the central funds given for administration. I was told till now no. Out of the 6% you are getting, you're not breaking through the system and getting people. So that is the answer to Mr. Narayana's thing. On DOPT side, let me assure all the collectors, I did dismiss a lot of people, I threw out a lot of people. So, but I did ensure that no person who is honest, who is straightforward suffered. I don't think I have ever punished an officer for a bona fide mistake. If someone is taking money, it's unpardonable. But on a bona fide, even on the issue of punishing, I used to check back from all the sources. In one case, I remember the case came to me just as ripe as it could be. We are just sending it to UPSC. I called that officer. I said, tell me any person whom I should talk to who would talk in your favor. The person told me it's the name of some person. I talked to him. The person was very blunt and clear. They said, nice person, but integrity we don't certify. This service cannot stay with a loose integrity. This service has been known for its integrity, and we cannot compromise integrity. So on integrity issues, I don't think we can spare anyone. But on issues like making wrong judgments, making wrong assessment, I don't think we punished anyone. So that is one thing. The officers, the younger officers that may combine my role as CVC, do feel that they can be punished. I'm very, very careful that what to say if I ask any service, I do read a lot of things, try and check back at every place whether we are taking a right decision or not. So the service is not meant to push files. The service, the institution of collector was made to take bold decisions. We are very, very upset if the people don't take decision. But we are very happy if they take a decision and it's a bona fide mistake. We don't say anything about that. This was another issue which was raised. Another issue which Mr. Bhatti raised was work in a system. There are a lot of issues how to handle the post. If you are straight, you may suffer, may be transferred, but at the end of the day, you maintain your integrity. And by and large, officers are cared for that. During our posting, we do a lot of hard work while posting an officer. We do find out from so many sources. Even during empanel, we do a lot of hard work just to check whether the officer is good. There's a whole lot of things that we go into it before we decide whether we take a decision for punishing him or for not empaneling him. I would again compliment Mr. Matthew for having written such an interesting book. A lot of people in the world want to know how does the system evolve, what are the basic ingredients. Great work done. This is an institution which can deliver. This is an institution, you give them any work, they would do it. And if you're honest, people will respect you. They normally have a lot of, if the collector says something, they would respect it, they would disperse it. But then don't lose your credibility. If your credibility is lost, your post is lost. So if you promise something, make it a point to get it done. And in some cases, some people promised and told me as Secretary DOPT, we went by the decision. So we have a lot of trust in your institution. We want this institution to continue. The country looks at this institution, and I'm sure you'll uphold this dignity of the institution. All the best. I would, at the end, request Mr. Matthew, there are a lot of things which we can discuss. When you are in Delhi, we can discuss it. It will be a great fun to know what about the service. You have spent hours together finding out various things. We like to add some issues about the collectors from IAS also. They have great experience. They bitterly fought their battle. Even today, the single line brief that we have been given is, don't go for efficiency, but at no point of cost are we compromising integrity. You all are aware that the DOPT minister is the Prime Minister, and the single line brief is we will not compromise on integrity. If the integrity is doubtful, we are not willing to look at a person. Thank you, all the best. Great work done. We are very proud of you. You have put some books on record. They may become a part of some library.
Thank you
Very
so
inspirational words, sir. Very inspirational words, sir. Thank you very much. We carry back the wisdom that you've given us. I'll now invite Professor Bish to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. As we come to end of this invigorating and enlightening session of the district officer, I am sure all the dignitaries have benefited a lot to hear from today's gathering. I, on behalf of the National Center for Good Governance and the entire National Center for Good Governance team from Delhi and Mussoorie office, express our gratitude, heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Sri Sanjay Kothari sir for sparing time for his busy schedule and enlightening us with his words, along with providing the space for such an enriching academic congregation. Sir. Thank you very much, sir. I wish to express my gratitude for Dr. C.K. Matthew sir for obliging us with his energy and pearl of wisdom today. Sir, this book gives a new insight to governance issues in contemporary times, and we are sure that it has been a learning experience for all of us. Thank you very much, sir. I also wish to extend my sincere gratitude to Sri Sanjeev Chopra, sir, Director of Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, Mussoorie, for his involvement despite his other engagement. So, thank you very much, sir. I would also like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to our respected Director General NCGG and Additional Secretary DRPG, Sri V. Srinivasan, for his continuous guidance.
Bishti, just one. CVC wants to hear one.
If Mr. Matthew allows, the whole book is about a collector. Let at least one collector speak.
Okay. Can I request Collector Sholapur from Maharashtra to speak, please? We have a request from Collector Sholapur. Can you hear us? District Collector Sholapur?
Any other collector?
Yes, sir, he is connected. You can see him on the screen. Collector Sholapur? मैसेज भी आया है, मैसेज आया, रिक्वेस्ट आया है.
इसे एक से बुलवा दो.
Is there any collector who wants to? Oh, he comes. Yes, Collector Sholapur, please. Yes. Can you please unmute yourself and speak? You're muted. Can't hear it. Can you please unmute yourself, Collector Sholapur?
Any other collector?
Yeah, is there? Would any other collector like to speak, please? Bhagwati ka Sirohi ka message है,
Sir, next time they're not.
नहीं, he's not able to speak, Sirohi. बैठा हुआ है. इसका message था बोलना. Okay, continue.
Thanks, sir.
We'll take his comments.
I have almost covered, sir. So again, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record thanks to our respected Director General, NCGG, and the Additional Secretary DRPG, Sri V. Srinivasan, for his continuous guidance he has extended towards organizing this event. He has always demonstrated an exemplary leadership with us, thoughtful insights, his vast proficiency and academic inclination greatly add values to the delivery of our efforts. I would also like to extend a warm and heartfelt gratitude to Dr. A. Narayana for his wonderful ideas and opinions that he shared with us today. Thanks to all the district collectors from across the nation who joined us today's event, and all the university professors, DRPG officers, Madam Janki from CVC, and other participants for their enthusiastic presence that made this session a truly engaging one. With these words, I would like to end this session and thanks everyone present here for this precious time. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you.
All the
Thank you.
best.
Thanks, Mr. Kothari.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.